When people talk about The Legend of Zelda, they usually think of an epic solo adventure, vast overworlds, deep dungeons, and a single hero destined to save Hyrule. So when The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures was released in 2004, it didn't just feel different, it sort of felt out of place for the series. A game that asked a bold question: what if Zelda wasn't about one hero, but four? This was a Zelda game built around chaos, cooperation, miscommunication, and shared problem solving, and to this day, it still stands as one of Nintendo's most ambitious experiments. For me personally, The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventure wasn't something I played back in my youth, so today we're taking a look at how Four Swords Adventure blends classic dungeon design with one of the most unique multiplayer system that the series has ever seen, and why even years later, it remains one of Zelda's most underrated experiments. I'm Reisigo, and today we're slashing our way through The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventure, game 80 of my challenge to beat every single GameCube game, and then review it. Few video game franchises have shaped the medium the way The Legend of Zelda has. At this point, you could probably go onto YouTube and find hundreds, even thousands of videos telling you about the history of the Zelda franchise. So I'm not going to cover the history of the franchise, just some development history for this game, keeping it brief and then moving on. The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures wasn't its original title when it was announced back at E3 of 2003. It was introduced to the world as Four Swords for Nintendo GameCube, and the game was always meant to be the prequel to The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. But at some point it was changed during development. The game was designed in 2D using the game graphic style of Four Swords in order to add continuity to its Game Boy Advance prequel. The decision of a top-down view was decided on because they thought it would be much easier to understand when playing with 4 players. Four Sword Adventures originally featured graphics and sprites based on A Link to the Past, but it ended up being some sort of mix between A Link to the Past and Wind Waker. The game was originally supposed to include a magic meter, have no item slots, and instead of collecting Force Gems, the Links were originally going to collect rupees. Pretty standard in the franchise. After a playable demo was shown at London Games Week in 2003, the game was then released on June 7, 2004 in North America. There was some minor differences that players and fans both noticed. Each demo that was released was a little bit different from the final release of the game, but personally I don't think any of them were all that drastic, so I'm not going to go too much into it. I said I wanted to keep this brief for history, so let's move on to the story for The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventure. On the surface, Four Swords Adventures tells a relatively straightforward Zelda story. Princess Zelda senses a growing darkness, and the seal on the Four Sword is disturbed and broken. This causes Link to be split into 4 heroes so that he can stop the new threat in the world. But beneath that simplicity is one of the strangest narratives in the series. Four Swords is one of the few Zelda games where Ganon isn't the main villain of the game. Well, at least not at first. Instead, the game introduces Dark Link as the primary antagonist, a distorted reflection of the hero himself. Rather than a lone hero rising to meet his destiny like in previous games, Four Swords Adventures frames evil as something that emerges from division, rivalry, and imbalanced themes that directly mirror the game's multiplayer mechanics. The Four Sword represents multiplication rather than mastery. Unlike the Master Sword, which tests the player to see if Link is worthy, the Four Sword fractures power by splitting Link into 4, which undermines the traditional Zelda fantasy by not having a single Link as the chosen one. This means that Four Swords only progresses through cooperation, and that the 4 Links' powers comes from their coordination together. Dark Link isn't just an enemy, but he also mirrors the player. In multiplayer, players constantly sabotage each other by stealing power gems, putting each other into danger, and racing for personal rewards such as upgrades. These actions are what Dark Link embodies in the game. He's what happens when cooperation collapses into competition. This is just another example of how players actually behave when given freedom in shared spaces. When Ganon eventually re-enters the story, he does so in a way that changes the whole game. This incarnation of Ganon is not born of divine destiny or ancient prophecy. He's simply a thief empowered by the Trident, and his ambition allows for his rise instead of relying on some sort of fate. This fits the broader theme of the game, telling the player that power doesn't come from anyone's destiny, it comes from how you wield the power given to you. Within the Zelda timeline, Four Sword Adventures exist in a strange place. It feels isolated from the overall timeline of the series, and many people look at this as a weakness. However, Four Swords isn't a game about a legend being passed down through history. Instead, the story focuses more on the interaction happening currently over legacy. This means critics often describe the story as being minimal, but I think that misses the point of the game. The story was never meant to be told with long cutscenes or a bunch of exposition. It's meant to be told through the gameplay, the player conflicts, and the cooperation and selfishness of playing with other people. I'm not alone in thinking that the story for Four Swords only fully exists when multiple people play the game together. I'll tip my hat to Nintendo for trying something different in the series when they could have stuck with the tried and true storytelling of the franchise up to that point. Visually, Four Swords Adventures blends the cartoon charm of the Wind Waker with the top-down perspective of a classic Zelda. Sprites are expressive, colorful, and packed with personality. I personally love the art style for this game, and I don't feel like any other style would have worked with it. As for the music, Four Swords reimagines classic Zelda themes while introducing playful, energetic tracks that fit the multiplayer chaos perfectly. I don't have too much for this, I just think overall it's really good. Unlike most Zelda games, Four Swords Adventures tackles its gameplay a bit different. They do this in two ways. First, they focus the gameplay around the idea of playing with friends, but in a way that can also be completed in a single-player experience. The puzzles require the help of the other three links, which causes chaos with friends, but can be as easy as just leaving a stationary link when playing alone. The second way they tackle gameplay differently in Four Swords is its level design. Most Zelda games have an open world to explore, and then return to. But in Four Swords, the world is level-based. Each stage is a self-contained puzzle box filled with its own enemies, secrets, and mechanics designed around teamwork. One of the most interesting things about this portion of the game is that after each level, everything you collected resets, and you start the following level without any extra equipment, hearts, or force gems. This is drastically different from any other Zelda game I have ever personally played. During each level, the player must use not only their equipment, but also the other links. They can do this by throwing them across gaps, standing on switches simultaneously, and solving puzzles using coordination and communication. This feels like an early version of an online puzzle game where all your friends are in the voice chat together. When playing in a single player, these puzzles and challenges don't change, you just end up controlling all the links yourself. You only have yourself to rely on, and blame if you fail. When playing through the game in single player, you can switch the formation that the links stand in, or attack with. Using these formations to battle strong enemies, solving puzzles, or walking through narrow passages without falling off the edge of the world. I played through this game alone, and I still had a good time playing through it, but I think it would have been much more fun experiencing the chaos of other players accidentally or intentionally attacking each other. Nintendo was trying a lot of gimmicks at this time, and this game didn't escape that fate. The gimmick for Four Swords Adventure involved the Game Boy Advance. The Game Boy Advance controller is more than just a novelty item, and I feel like this was one of the better things Nintendo tried to do. Each Game Boy Advance displayed private information. Things like secret passages or unique puzzle clues. This created moments where players had to trust each other, or I guess you could have lied to one another. Sometimes having the option to cause chaos can really add moments to the game that will last the players forever. The downside of this is that it ended up being very expensive to play like that during that time period. Each player needed to own a Game Boy Advance and the cables to attach it to the GameCube. Because players needed all that stuff, it also made this mode inconvenient, and it was the major reason many players never experienced the games to its full potential. I don't want to go over every single thing that happened in this game, but I want to summarize what the game was made up of. Four Swords Adventures has a total of 8 chapters that need to be completed to finish the game and face the final boss. There are a total of 9 main bosses in the game, but you're required to face Phantom Ganon on 2 separate occasions, so I guess the game has 8 unique bosses, and also has 9 mini-bosses. These mini-bosses, in most cases, get you prepared to face the main boss of that current chapter, and sometimes they're just there to slow you down. One of the most important items in the game are called Force Gems. The more of these you collect, the stronger the Four Sword becomes. Sometimes you'll run into puzzles that need a specific amount of Force Gems to advance, which can be annoying, but you are able to find these all over the world, in grass, under boulders, in water, or by breaking things like pots. Even some of the enemies will drop them when you defeat them. They come in 4 different colors, each having 2 sizes. A small green one that gives you 1, a large green one that gives you 100, a small blue one that gives you 5, a large blue one that gives you 150, a small red one for 20, a large red one for 200, a small purple one for 50, and a large purple one for 300. The small ones I would say you can ignore, but the large ones end up being extremely important. We can also collect standard Zelda items like bombs, a boomerang, a bow, and a slingshot, but there are some items that I hadn't really had any experience with before playing the game. We can get a fire rod that shoots fireballs or lights braziers, a lamp that lights up dark areas and burns items in front of us, a magic hammer that can smash or bury stumps that will be in the way, and when we store up power in the hammer, we can slam it down, causing a shockwave that stuns enemies for a short period of time. We can get Pegasus boots that when we press A repeatedly, we can dash, allowing for us to dash over most holes in the game. Rock's Feather, which will allow us to jump across chasms or larger holes, and lastly, the shovel that lets us dig holes in any soft ground throughout the whole game. Sometimes we'll need to dig holes to find key items or to dig up some force gems. The last thing I want to mention about gameplay is that each chapter is like a different stage, so we experience different environments while we play. Usually places that are staples of the Legend of Zelda series. Things like Lake Hylia, Death Mountain, Lost Woods, and Kakariko Village. They all have their own themes and puzzles that use their environments instead of the same thing over and over again. I feel like Four Swords Adventures excels in the gameplay department, and the developers focused on this aspect of the game first and built the story around it, instead of the other way around. I had a ton of fun playing this game, and when a cutscene or a story portion would show up, I found myself wanting to just go back to the gameplay. Despite its creativity, Four Swords Adventures struggled to find an audience. The hardware requirements were steep, online play was non-existent, and it released during a time when Zelda fans were expecting more traditional experiences. As a result, it became one of the most overlooked entries in the entire franchise. Today, Four Swords Adventure stands as a fascinating experiment, one that dared to break Zelda's formula at the time. It's not perfect, but it is charming, inventive, and unlike anything else in the series even to this day. And maybe that's what makes it special. Four Swords Adventure isn't just a Zelda game that came out over 20 years ago, but also a reminder that sometimes when Nintendo releases something with a strange idea, it ends up being some of the most memorable. So would I recommend The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventure? I think I would. The idea behind the whole game is interesting, and even while I played the game alone, I found the experience to be fun and enjoyable. Do I think it would be better to play with friends? Absolutely, but playing it alone can still grant you hours of fun. Four Swords isn't a huge time sink, and I like that Nintendo went with a one-off story for this game, so I think you should give this one a try. At least give it a little bit of a chance. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the like button, subscribe for more GameCube retrospectives, and let me know in the comments if you've ever played this one, and if you haven't, it might be time to gather a few friends, a few Game Boy Advances, and give this forgotten Zelda gem another chance. Until next time, remember that some cooperation can help save the world.